330 million years ago, the ground moved differently in what is now Scotland. A scorpion nearly 2 feet long, the largest that ever walked on dry land, was the apex of its world. It was built for a time when oxygen ran thick through the air, when raw size was the single best weapon evolution had ever invented. It persisted for 25 million years, a span longer than most success stories in the entire history of this planet. Then the Carboniferous ended. Smaller scorpions kept going. They're still here. You could find one under a rock tonight. But this one, the giant, the record holder, the undisputed king of the forest floor, was selected out, erased, gone from the record like it was never allowed to exist in the first place. And here's the question that makes this a case and not just a fact. Why did size, the very thing that made it unbeatable, become its death sentence? Before we can accuse anyone, we need to know who died. His name is Pulmonoscorpius kirktonensis. The species name comes from East Kirkton, a quarry outside Edinburgh, where his remains, really the impressions of his armor pressed into stone, were pulled out of the rock. The genus name means, roughly, lung scorpion. Remember that word. It is going to matter more than any other clue in this entire case. Now picture the animal itself, up to 70 centimeters long. Call it 2 feet. To make that real, lay your forearm on a table, elbow to fingertip. That's about one section of him, not the whole thing. Stand a house cat next to him and the cat loses on length. This is not a scorpion you flick off your boot. This is a scorpion that decides whether you keep the boot. He wore a chitinous exoskeleton, armor and skeleton fused into the same piece of engineering. He had pincers built to grip and hold. He had a tail, and at the end of it, a stinger. He was a ground-based ambush predator. And in a forest that had never seen a mammal, never seen a bird, never seen a snake, he sat near the very top of the food chain. He very likely fed on large insects, amphibians, and the small early reptiles that shared his floor. Now, the forest itself, the Carboniferous, was a world we would not recognize. Wet, dense, primeval swamp forests, stacked with tree ferns and towering club mosses, the whole thing slowly compressing into the coal. We would burn 300 million years later. And the air was the secret ingredient. Oxygen sat at around 35% of the atmosphere. Today it's 21%. That extra oxygen is the entire reason a scorpion could get this big in the first place. That's the lung scorpion clue paying off. He breathed air through book lungs, stacked, page-like sheets of tissue, and he breathed it like a professional in an atmosphere richer than anything alive today will ever taste. Sit with that for a second. 2 feet of armored predator breathing supercharged air, ruling a swamp for 25 million years. He was not a freak. He was not a mistake. He was a success story, which is exactly what makes his disappearance a crime scene. The evidence. So let's look at what the rock actually tells us. Because a body is one thing, a pattern is another. Here's the timeline. Pulmonoscorpius appears in the record, thrives, and then, across the back half of the Carboniferous, goes quiet. Search the Permian layers that come next, and you find nothing. No smaller descendants scaling down over millions of years. No slow fade, he doesn't taper off, he just stops. That's clue number 1. He vanishes inside one very specific window. And that window is not a peaceful one. Toward the end of the Carboniferous, the planet convulsed. Scientists call it the Carboniferous rainforest collapse, and it was real. Global cooling set in. The oxygen that fed the giants started falling hard. The vast tropical rainforest dried out and shattered into isolated pockets. The lush, wet, oxygen-drunk world that made a 2-foot scorpion possible was pulled apart at the seams. So, case closed, right? Big weird animal, big weird catastrophe, they line up in time. Done. Except, here's clue number 2, and it's the one that keeps you up at night. Other scorpions were in that same forest, same catastrophe, same falling oxygen, same collapsing trees. And they did not die. They walked straight through the extinction that erased Pulmonoscorpius and came out the other side. Their descendants are under rocks in your garden right now. The catastrophe didn't kill scorpions, it killed this one. That's not a mass extinction, that's a selection. Something in that collapsing world reached out and picked the giant, specifically, and left his smaller cousins alone. We have a body. We have a time of death, and we have a killer with a preference. Now we find the suspects. 3 of them. Each one has a motive. Each one has evidence for, and this is the important part, each one has a hole in its story. Suspect 1. Suffocation. The oxygen crash. It fell from around 35% towards something closer to 15 by the end of the Carboniferous. Less than half of what it had been. The motive? A big body needs a lot of oxygen, and here's the specific problem. Book lungs are a passive system. They don't pump. They don't actively ventilate the way an insect's tracheal tubes do, or the way your own lungs do. Air more or less has to find its own way in. In a rich atmosphere, that's fine. There's oxygen to spare. Cut the oxygen in half, and a passive breather with an enormous body to supply is in serious trouble. The giant should choke first. The bigger you are, the harder you fall. It's a beautiful motive. It fits the body size perfectly. The hole. The other scorpions had the exact same lungs. Same passive book lungs, same falling oxygen. And they lived. So breathing by itself is not a death sentence. Suffocation has an alibi problem. Suspect 2. The collapsing house. Habitat destruction. When the rainforest fragmented, the world didn't just get cooler, it got broken. The continuous wet forest that a big ambush predator needs to hunt, to hide, and to stay hydrated splintered into islands. The motive: lose the habitat, lose the hunter. A big predator needs a big stable territory, and a big stable supply of prey. Shatter the forest and you starve the top of the food chain first. That's always how it goes. The whole. Fragmentation is bad for everyone, not just for giants. It's a strong motive, but on its own it doesn't explain the surgical precision. Why him and not them? Suspect 3. The new gang in town. Competition. This exact window is when the early reptiles began their expansion. New predators, new competitors, amniotes that could handle drier conditions, lay eggs on land, and push into niches that used to belong to the arthropod kings. The motive: the neighborhood changed hands. A slow invertebrate ambush hunter, built for a wetter and richer world, gets outcompeted by faster, drier adapted vertebrates moving into his territory. The whole. The timing is suggestive, but the direct evidence is thin. We can't put a reptile at the scene holding the murder weapon. It's circumstantial. 3 suspects, 3 motives, 3 alibis. And notice what just happened. Not one of them can do it alone. The false lead. But let's be honest about how this case feels the first time you look at it. Because there's an answer so clean, so satisfying, that most people stop right here. It goes like this. The oxygen fell. The giant needed oxygen more than anyone. Therefore, the oxygen crash killed the giant. Size was a debt, and when the atmosphere called in the loan, the biggest debtor went bankrupt first. And the logic is genuinely airtight. The more you weigh, the more oxygen every kilogram of living tissue demands. A passive book lung can't compensate for a shortfall by breathing harder. It can't breathe harder. It just sits there and soaks. So when the air thins out, the big body is the one that should die, and it should die first. Elegant. Mechanical. Case closed. Carve it in stone. This should have destroyed him first. But here's the reversal that breaks the whole clean story. Modern scorpions breathe with book lungs too. The same passive, unpumped, page-stack system Pulmonoscorpius had. And some modern scorpions are not small. The emperor scorpion runs about 20 centimeters and does perfectly well in 21% oxygen, roughly the same oxygen level that supposedly murdered our giant. So the simple story falls apart in your hands. If book lungs plus lower oxygen were a straight death sentence, scorpions wouldn't be here at all. But they are. They breathe the same way. Some of them are big. Oxygen alone didn't do it. Size alone didn't do it. The clean answer is a false lead. And the fact that it's so tempting is exactly why the real killer stayed hidden for so long. The truth isn't one suspect. It's all 3 of them, in the same room, at the same time. The solution. Here's what actually happened. And it isn't a murder, it's a conspiracy. 3 killers, each aiming at the exact same target. Size as a strategy. Blow 1, the metabolic ceiling. Start with the oxygen, but get the mechanism right. When the air thinned, the giant didn't simply suffocate. Something quieter and more lethal happened. He became too expensive to run. Less oxygen means less energy your body can pull from each breath. A huge body already costs a fortune to maintain. Every kilogram demands fuel. Drop the oxygen and you drop the energy ceiling, so now that giant body needs even more food to stay solvent. And this is happening in a forest that is drying out and losing its prey. More cost, less income. That equation doesn't balance. It doesn't kill you in an afternoon. It prices you out over generations. Big stopped being a superpower and started being a liability on the books. Blow 2, the drying world. Now the exoskeleton turns on him. That armor that made him a tank has a flaw. It leaks water. Scorpions lose moisture through their exoskeleton, and here's the geometry. The bigger the animal, the more surface area, the more water lost. A giant is a giant evaporator. In a wet, continuous rainforest, no problem. The whole world is a humid room, but the forest fragmented and dried. The damp microhabitats a huge scorpion needed to keep from drying out shrank into scattered patches. A small scorpion can wedge into a crack, sit in a pocket of moisture, and wait out the bad times. A 2-foot scorpion cannot hide in a crack. He needs the entire wet forest to still exist. And it didn't anymore. Blow 3, nowhere to run. And then the final brutal detail. A narrow range means no exit. As far as we can tell, this giant did not span the globe. When his specific world came apart, there was no wetter, richer forest next door to retreat into. Small, widespread animals can shuffle to wherever conditions are still good. A large, specialized giant tied to a vanishing habitat has no escape route. The doors close one by one, and he's still inside. Now look at what those three have in common. Metabolic cost, water loss, no refuge. Every single one of them scales with size. Every single blow lands harder the bigger you are. And that is why his smaller cousins walked away. Not because they were tougher, because they were small. And small let them hide in cracks, run cheap on fuel, survive on less, and slip out when the world turned. The exact thing that made Pulmonoscorpius the king is the exact thing that killed him. It wasn't one shot, it was 3 shots into a single point. And the point was the number 2 feet. That's the loop closing. Size was the answer the whole time. Not as an advantage that failed, but as an advantage that turned into 3 weaknesses at once the moment the world changed its mind. The case is not closed now, the honest part. The part real cases have and fairy tales don't. We do not know everything here. The fossil record for carboniferous land animals is genuinely terrible. A wet, rotting forest is one of the worst places on Earth to preserve chitin and delicate bodies. So when I say he disappears from the record, I have to say the other thing too. Absence in the rock is not the same as absence in the world. It's entirely possible Pulmonoscorpius lived far beyond the single Scottish quarry that gave us his name in places that simply never fossilized. We may be reading a story with most of its pages torn out, and the threshold is fuzzy. Was 2 feet exactly the fatal size? Were there slightly smaller individuals who hung on a little longer, right at the edge of what was survivable? We can't draw that line cleanly. Extinction is rarely a switch. It's usually a slope, and we only ever see the top and the bottom of it. But here's the thing to hold on to, the thing bigger than one strange scorpion. The Carboniferous collapse was not the story of a single unlucky animal. It was the first time land ecosystems were torn down and rebuilt at scale. The first great reformatting of life on solid ground. Pulmonoscorpius is just the most dramatic name on a very long casualty list, and we are only beginning to understand what that reset actually did. The case stays open, it should. The verdict. So let's go back to where we started. The swamp, Scotland, 330 million years ago. That 2-foot hunter moving across the forest floor, armored, patient, unchallenged. I want you to see him clearly one more time. Not as a monster, not as a nightmare, as what he actually was. He did nothing wrong, that's the verdict. He wasn't a failed experiment. He wasn't a lumbering mistake waiting to be corrected. For 25 million years, he was perfectly, precisely, beautifully adapted to his world. He was the best possible answer to the exact question his environment was asking. The problem was never him. The problem was that the question changed. The oxygen fell. The forests dried. The world quietly rewrote the rules. And the very size that made him invincible in one world put him first in line to leave the next. He didn't lose a fight. Nobody beat him. His world simply stopped existing, and he was too big, too thirsty, and too rooted to one place to follow it into whatever came after. His small cousins survived by being unremarkable. He died by being magnificent. And maybe that's the real thing worth sitting with. Being the best at your world is only an advantage for as long as your world is still there. If you want more dead kings, and the exact reasons the planet stopped needing them, subscribe. The giants, the record holders, the animals that did everything right and vanished anyway. There's a whole graveyard of them, and every headstone is a case just like this one. The scorpion did everything right. His world just moved on without him.